But what happened after that is we started to see more and more trade unions and more of the large trade unions come out in favour. So Unite in October 2021 voted for electoral reform. The following year, Unison at their national delegate conference came out very strongly in favour of PR. And this meant that when we came out to conference last year, it's a photo from the vote there, we not only had a great debate, but we actually won the overwhelming endorsement of conference of Labour policy in favour of PR. And since then, we've seen other trade unions, Usdaw, just earlier this year, came out in favour. And the game sort of changed from that point onwards. The National Policy Forum process that has been happening over the last year is unusual in that it only happens really last year before the general election is expected. And I'm sure many of you are following that in many capacities. But what we got out of that, mobilizing a lot of support, lots of CLPs and representatives pushing for some sort of commitment on electoral reform, is we got this wording, which is dramatically outlined on your screen in front of you. The flaws in the current voting system are contributing to distrust and alienation we see in politics. And that's a really significant step forward. It's not the same as a commitment to changing the voting system, but it is historically a really sort of big move for the Labour Party. That's how we got to where we are. What this means for this year's conference, we basically want to keep building on the progress that we've made over the last 2 years. Crucially, that means we don't need to have the same fights that we've already had and already won in the past, and we really don't want to go backwards and find we have a weaker conference policy on PR, for example. And while we're doing all this, we need to focus on what Labour does in government, really. Labour is looking like, obviously, it's going to have a very streamlined, very disciplined manifesto. We'd love to get something in the manifesto on electoral reform, but we don't want to hang everything on that possibility. So in all of our discussions and conversations, what we really want to push for is Labour to actually act on this in government. That is the ultimate goal we're pushing for. So our overall aim for conference is basically using the opportunities that we have in and around conference, that's on the conference floor and beyond it, to really highlight the flaws that Labour has itself officially identified with first past the post, and encouraging Labour to do something in response to it. We don't want to stay in this untenable situation where we have criticism of first past the post on very accurate grounds, but we're not sort of planning to do anything about it. So that's what we're pushing for. And I hand over to Laura to talk a little bit about approach and messaging.
Yeah, brilliant. So this is going to be a seamless double act between me and a computer. So as Joe just said, one of the biggest challenges for us it's going to be an exciting conference. Many of you will be campaigning in your CLPs. You know that we're really getting on an election footing. That's all brilliant, but it's going to be quite a challenge to get voices heard around PR. What we really want to do is amplify and draw attention to Labour's criticism of first past the post, and just keep reminding people that that National Policy Forum statement was approved by the whole of the Labour Party. We need to encourage Labour to address the flaws that it has identified. It's just, as Joe said, not tenable that we should point out that something is bust and not suggest how we're going to fix it. And we want to encourage people from across the Labour movement to think about and elaborate on the problems which first past the post causes, whether that's for you in a campaigner in an area where you don't bother campaigning because no one's vote's going to count, whether that's for you because you're involved in a particular policy issue and you know that if we had more stable government, which PR would give us, we'd make progress under Labour and it wouldn't all be swept aside by the Tories. It might be because you really want to highlight the governments that we don't get. So we don't get the governments that actually represent the votes of the people. And we need to really lean into all of these discussions and use every opportunity to highlight them and make the link and the contrast about first past the post and what the Labour Party said about other aspects of our political system which are bust. So Keir has made some really great statements. We'll probably come on to this a bit later about sticking plaster politics, and others have talked about disenfranchisement, how disillusioned people are, how the system just isn't working. And we need to add into this discussion about fixing the electoral system. So here are some classic Keir quotes. The sticking plaster politics you'll have heard a number of times. Keir's also talked about this being not just a new government, a new Labour government, but also a new way of governing. He's spoken about how people feel like politics is broken and they have no voice, and how Labour will clean up our politics and restore trust in our democracy. So there's plenty of material for you to be using as you go around the conference site, whether it's on the conference floor, or in the fringes, in the bars and the restaurants. And our overarching message is that we need Labour in government to address the distrust and alienation caused by first past the post. So that's kind of the core of what we're about, reminding people of the basic fundamental case. What are we not doing at conference? This is slightly counterintuitive for a campaign, but actually we're not trying to win another conference motion debate. As Joe said, we just don't need to. And we don't want to risk the wins that we've had. We also don't want to try people's patience. I mean, many of you are in CLPs who passed pro-PR policy in 2021, 2022. You've taken policy to conference perhaps once or even twice. And you know that some of your colleagues in the CLPs are just really keen that your CLP discusses something else. Some of you, and this is really great, have passed PR policy for the first time, and there are a number of motions going, and in a way, this is testament to the success of the campaign that it's built its own momentum, and even without us really pushing for lots of motions, there are still, I think we're the fourth or fifth largest number of motions are for PR, but actually we don't need another debate on conference floor. And so we're going to be making it clear to everyone that we don't want to prioritise PR for debate in the priorities ballot. Those of you who are familiar will know that all of the motions get put in a big pot. There's a vote, and on the Sunday of conference, all of the delegates will decide what subjects they want to take forward for more considered debate. There will be 5, is it? 6. Used to be 10. There'll be 6. But we're not going to be fighting to get PR prioritised. So we do, however, want people to talk. I'm going to hand it over to Joe now.
Yeah, so the debate at this year's conference is going to be a little different from previous years, we understand. We're not going to know exactly until we get the first conference arrangements committee report, probably the night before, certainly the day of conference. This year, apparently it's going to be structured more around 5 missions rather than the 6 policy commissions. So these 5 missions, which Labour has been talking about a great deal. However, running through all of those, this is from the MPF report that's going to conference as well, is political reform and devolution. It's sort of described as underpinning all of those missions. Now, you might wonder if we've got 5 debates along those lines where constitutional reform would best fit in a debate, but actually there is, looking at the Conference Act, there is provisionally this Building Stronger Communities debate on the Tuesday morning session before the leader's speech. And that seems to be the only sort of policy debate that's happening on the agenda that isn't one of these 5 missions. Now, we'll update this as, it's all confirmed, and we'll update you with any changes that may happen. But my guess is that that's going to be when we want to talk about constitutional reform and about electoral reform. Now, I mean, this is clearly for delegates. Delegates are allowed on the conference floor. Delegates can speak during debates. All being well, when that Building Stronger Communities debate is kicked off, there'll be a statement from, an official from the party. Usually it's one of the chairs or the conveners of the relevant policy commission. I imagine there'll be someone like that this year, and they'll sort of present party policies on that matter. There may be policy motions if other sort of devolution or political reform or community related motions are passed. and prioritized for debate, they will be moved during that session, at the start of that session. And then once you've had the sort of party policy put forward and any other motions put forward, then delegates on the conference floor can, raise a hand, get called, and go up and speak about those topics. And what we'd really like to ensure happens basically is that we get some really good statements about the need for electoral reform. We think the best way to frame this is an example, and we can talk with you individually, and we can practice and work up a speech or whatever is most useful, but this is just a sort of rough outline. We think we should start with fitting with what Labour or what Starmer is saying, and thinking back to those examples Laura had on the screen a moment ago. We can talk about sticking plaster politics, or we can talk about restoring trust in democracy. Then linking it to what Labour's official policy said about first past the post, the driving alienation and distrust, and then saying what Labour needs to do and why. And again, when we're in government, what we need to do, why we need to do it. If we can get a few really good contributions to the conference debate making that point, firstly, they're going to go down really well. It's a very popular position with conference. But secondly, it's just really going to underline and I think sort of communicate the importance of the issue, and it's going to be a good way to build on the progress we've made to date. Whatever you do, you only have, I think, a 2-minute window to speak. Shorter than that is generally better. You don't want to try people's patience. Some speeches do go on a bit. Here's a few of those are the ones we looked at earlier, some of the things you could think about working into an intervention on the conference floor. Other random bits, there's polling finding that actually our core target voters, people like Workington Man and Stevenage women, the voters we're trying hardest to win over, and we need to win over most if we're going to form the next government. Polling by Labour Together found that they believe by a large margin that changing the voting system would be the biggest way to improve British politics. There's lots of evidence, and we got reports and briefing notes and things that you can look at for this. Countries with PR have much higher public satisfaction with democracy than first past the post systems. We actually have a new report, and it's very short, you'll be pleased to hear, it's an 8-page summary of everything you need to know about electoral reform, which could be really useful. We'll have them at conference, and you can have that to hand. Okay, so that's conference delegates intervening from the conference floor, and I mean, I think that's probably the biggest priority, the biggest thing we'd ask of you if you are a conference delegate. This next thing we're asking of volunteers or delegates, and it's to do with the fringe, basically. Just speak about it.
Thanks. So I'm sure many of you have had your party programs through now with the agenda for the conference. We've been through and basically made the PR campaigners agenda. So you'll see here we've got a ton of different fringes where the topics overlap with PR, and it would be great to have people in the room asking questions of the panels. I won't go through every single one because there's loads of them, but if you're in our WhatsApp groups, we'll share these agendas probably the night before each day so that you can decide which ones you want to go to. You see there's lots and lots on Monday, and then Tuesday and Wednesday are a little quieter. But there's an enormous amount of discussion at this year's conference about constitutional issues and devolution and empowering communities, and it's a really good place for using some of that messaging that Joe and Laura were talking about, and really making the case for building on that NPF wording, criticising first past the post. So there's some kind of little guidance here for asking questions at fringes. Try to make it relevant to the discussion at hand, rather than just shoehorning in PR. Try to make sure that you're responding to what is being discussed, be it devolution or empowering local communities or votes at 16, and invite the panel to kind of elaborate on Labour policy which criticises the flaws in the voting system and first past the post. And as before, yeah, try and keep it brief. And yeah, it's really just building on that criticism of first past the post, and trying to make sure as well that we've got a real presence at all of these different fringes, because as I say, there's lots of discussion around democracy this year. Mr. Jeff.
Okay, so a really important thing we're going to be doing is leafleting. I mean, this is something for volunteers, also in a different way for delegates, which I'll get onto in a moment. The really, really crucial leafleting is, I think we may be the first campaign in Labour Party history who will be handing out leaflets saying we are not looking to prioritise our issue. And on the first day of conference, the Sunday, Women's Conference, of course, is the day before, and we'll be there for that as well. But on the first day of the full conference, we want to make sure we're handing a leaflet to every single person arriving, and certainly every delegate, making clear that, you know, although this is a big issue and one that we're going to be, you know, talking about a lot at conference, it's not one we want prioritised for conversating and debate. So, Sam, do you want to jump in and talk a little bit about where you want volunteers? Sam is going to be organising your.
Hi. So, firstly, thank you everyone who said they'd be up for helping with handing out leaflets and volunteering generally. It's really, really appreciated. I will be sending an email round tomorrow with more details, but essentially there are two big entrances to conference, and we want to be standing at both entrances at different points throughout the day when people are coming into conference and leaving conference, handing out our leaflets so they know we're there, and they know, firstly, what's going on with conference and PR, that we don't want them to prioritise PR on the priority ballot, but also that we have fringes, we have events coming up, and so we'll be meeting outside every leafleting session a restaurant called East Seast, which is directly opposite the conference centre, which is very easy to find once you're there. And yeah, it's normally quite an entertaining buzz handing out leaflets around conference, because there's a number of leafleters and a lot of people trying to come in and out, and it becomes a little bit of a gauntlet for conference delegates, but it's often done with good humour by everyone involved. So yeah.
Thank you, Sam. And delegates, we're not going to be asking to sort of stand outside conference leafleting. You're going to have enough to do as delegates. But what is really useful is there are these regional delegate briefings. They happen this year all at the same time, which makes it much easier. They all happen at 9 AM on the Sunday in different locations. What's really useful is if you're willing to take some leaflets along to that delegate briefing and then hand them out to other delegates. It's just a really good way to sort of get our message inside. So yeah, we'll be in touch, I think, via the WhatsApp and via email to try and sort of identify people who would be happy to do that, and then we'll arrange to hand them over. You know, we'll just have a tote bag with a handful of leaflets that we can hand to you either the night before at our fringe, or you know, we can arrange to do it outside in the morning. And these leaflets, by the way, they aren't just about the priorities ballot. You know, one side will be on that, one side will be on one of our fringe events. Then we've got another leaflet, which is, you know, 2 fringe events. And we really just want as good attendance at those events as we can as well, just to really create a buzz around the issue. Right, this is our pre-briefing that we're doing right now, but we're going to have an in-person briefing in Liverpool as well. If you were at last year's conference, it's the same venue. It's called Hobo Kiosk. It's a very lovely micro pub, which is not far at all from conference. It's about a 10-minute walk up the hill. We're doing it at 1 PM on the Sunday evening. So do come along to that if you're a delegate. I think that one will be for delegates only. You're very welcome to come if you're a volunteer, but you'll probably have other things to be doing at that point in time. We also got an exhibition stand inside the conference centre, shared with Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform. You can always come and sort of track us down there. There's going to be people there while conference in session the whole time. There'll be lots of merch, both at the stand and at our delegate briefings and fringe events. So come and track us down if you need anything. And I'm just going to go through very quickly our fringe events. On the Saturday, women's conference, Labour Campaign for Electoral Reform is having a lunchtime event, also at Hobo Kiosk. So do come along to that if you're a delegate to women's conference, or if you're a woman and around. And then Saturday night, we are having our sort of think piece fringe event about how political change and economic change are intrinsically linked. As Keir Starmer himself has said, that's another one you can pick up on. On Sunday, we're having a rally, which is kind of our flagship fixture in the conference calendar. This year, it's co-sponsored. We're really pleased by ASLEF and Musicians Union. Yeah, that should be a good one, I think. And then on the Tuesday evening, we're having a reception. So come along to that. It's a good place to sort of debrief on how the whole conference went.